The third installment of Fantastic Beasts is finally out, and since we already know where to find them and how the second movie was a crime, everybody and their grandma is now of course wondering what Dumbledore's secrets were. Let's find out. That's right, Fantastic Beasts: The Secrets of Dumbledore primarily featured two main secrets. Oh, and just to be clear, spoilers from now on. So the first secret is obviously the big twist that Credence, or should I say Aurelius, is in fact a Dumbledore. But hold on, he's not Aberforth's and Albus's brother, he's actually Aberforth's son. See what they did there? Cause it's not this Dumbledore, but this one. Okay, so jokes aside, I actually like that decision because to be honest, the end of Crimes Against Humanity felt a whole lot like JJ's mystery boxing with Rey in Star Wars. But having Aberforth being Aurelius' dad puts him a little more to the forefront and also gives Aurelius an emotional connection to the Dumbledore family that feels a bit deeper than I anticipated. So I like that. And if we were only talking about this movie, it would have been fine with me. But since of course this is the big follow-up franchise to our boy HP, we kinda also need to consider the bigger picture. Which is exactly where Credence, or Aurelius, being Aberforth's son, kinda falls apart. But before we get into that, I want to talk a bit about Dumbledore's second secret, which this time is actually Albus Dumbledore's secret, in that he was in love, and maybe still somewhat is, with Gellert Grindelwald. And yes, I know, this is of course not a secret to us, we were already filled in on that hot tea way back in the day thanks to JK's amazing Twitter afterthoughts. But in the movies themselves, this is the first time that their relationship is addressed explicitly. Now that, in and of itself, is kinda insane enough as is. I mean, for a 5-part movie series about two gay wizards playing with their wands, I'm sorry, I had to get one in there. The point is that it sure sends a message that we had to wait for the third movie to get one of them to say the word love to the other. And the sad part is, this is then celebrated as this huge progressive move forward. Man, Hollywood really is 50 years behind, isn't it? But anyways, we're finally here, so let's at least appreciate that. Speaking of the two, I really like Mads Mikkelsen as Grindelwald here. He and Jude Law do a great job of portraying their relationship with what they were given. And I also think that Mads really gets to shine as the Grindelwald who rallies up supporters for his cause. It's a bit of a shame that the second movie was such a gut punch, since this one really could, or rather should, have given us the actual persuasive Grindelwald. See, since we already know that this is supposed to be a 5-part story, we can use the basic rules of storytelling to sort of map out where everything is supposed to be. This would make the first movie the introduction point to the universe, which sets up the upcoming conflict between Grindelwald and Dumbledore. And I think for the most part it does its job well enough to do just that. All good so far. The second movie, The Crimes of Grindelwald, would then show us why Grindelwald is dangerous, how he actually reaches people and makes sense to them in a way that will make them follow him into straight up war. And what we got was, of course, well, not that. So let's say that we did our homework and we had a strong character in Grindelwald. We can then get to this one as the turning point of the story, with Grindelwald's plan to get elected successfully being foiled by the gang, serving as a false peak before shit really goes down in the fourth movie, where everything seems lost until we get to the final climax that is the legendary fight between the wizards. But in order to do that, we would have needed a strong convincing Grindelwald in the second movie to make his case. And seeing what Matt's version of the character looks like, makes me think that this is actually a guy who people would follow. And I really would have liked to see him in the second movie being that character. And to be fair, I don't put that on Johnny. I put it on the script, so no shade here. Oh yeah, and speaking of the second movie, remember how the Blood Pact was this really big thing? Well, apparently it wasn't. They started this one out by addressing how it would be consequential, with Albus almost ripping off his arm. But the way it got destroyed in the end, I don't know, it seemed kinda anticlimactic to me. On the other hand though, I really loved how even Dumbledore was just like, yeah, let's just call it fate. I don't know what's going on either, but I guess we don't have to worry about it anymore. So yeah, maybe they didn't really have a good reason to keep it around any longer, so they kinda just got rid of it. But honestly, that's fine by me. I feel like they streamlined the plot in this one a bit more in general, and I think it works for the movie's benefit. I mean, even though the beginning was a bit of confusing, but I guess that was kind of the point, I think it all came together quite nicely, with the gang wanting to bring their chillin' to the election to prevent Grindelwald from faking the election. I thought that was pretty good. I liked that Grindelwald wanted to get elected, and I also think it was cool that his plan involved muppeteering a dead Bombi around to ultimately win over the vote. Man, Wizard Society has the best rules. But yeah, I actually really enjoyed how the story came together. And speaking of bringing things together, this is a good time to go back to the first secret, with Aurelius being Aberforth's son. So as I mentioned earlier, I actually liked that they went for the father-son relationship rather than them being brothers. I also enjoyed their little mirror messaging they had going on, and I feel like this is pretty much as solid of a build-up when it comes to their reunion as we could have hoped for. I actually would like to see that continued and built upon in the upcoming movie, but I guess with Ezra Miller being, let's say, complicated, I kinda doubt we'll get a whole lot more on that front going forward. But now that we know that Aurelius is Aberforth's son, you're of course wondering how they know that, right? And yes, you guessed it, this brings us back to the previous movie. Yay! Okay, so what do we know about the whole baby Aurelius thing? We learned that while Dumbledore had his romance with Grindelwald, Aberforth also met someone, a girl from Godric's Hollow. At one point she left though, or had to leave, and then talks made the rounds that she had a baby. Aberforth's baby. So far so good. This brings us to the second movie, because now we know that Aurelius ended up on that same boat on which Leda Lestrange and her half-brother also ended up. Leda swapped the two babies, and when the ship eventually sank, Leda's half-brother died, while Aurelius survived in his place. Now keep in mind, at this point, Leda was the only one who knew this. Together with Leda, baby Aurelius makes it to America where he is adopted by Marilu Barebone, who gives him the name Credence. Years go by and Leda keeps her secret. Credence eventually forms an Obscurus, which draws the attention of Grindelwald onto him. Now at the end of the second movie, Leda finally comes clean and tells the whole story, but even she still doesn't know who Credence really is. And later, when Grindelwald reveals that his actual name is Aurelius, he tells him that his brother is coming for him, instead of his uncle. So even he has no idea what's going on at this point. So how did Dumbledore know? As of right now, this is still kinda open. So will we ever get a scene addressing this? Yeah, I don't know. The thing is, in my book this moment is actually a pretty good indicator of what I think a big sentiment behind the scenes was. And that we're mostly going to forget about all the things that the previous movie set up in such a complicated way that they all seemed somewhat important, but we actually don't really have a good way of resolving them. Which means that we're just gonna kinda brush over them a little and hope that everybody is on board. And I gotta say, I am. And I'm glad they dropped the whole plotline, because the whole baby swap thing was so convoluted, it stood in its own way. Now if dropping these kinds of storylines seems a bit out of character for JK to you, I would have to agree. But the thing with this one is, this time JK wasn't the only one writing it. So word on the street has it that Warner Brothers wasn't too happy with how the second one performed, which is why they gave her a co-author this time around, with Steve Kloves. And this guy's not just any rando. He actually wrote all the Harry Potter screenplays except for Order of the Phoenix, because he wanted to make his own movie at that point, but it never really happened. The point is, this guy knows his stuff about the universe, and I think he might be a good part of the reason why this one came out more streamlined and got rid of a lot of the plot elements that apparently aren't that important to the overall story. Like for example, Nagini isn't even in this one. The Blood Pact is gone. Queenie is back with the gang again, and the whole Credence/Aurelius storyline also seems to have come to its conclusion. So yeah, that's how I think they generally wanted to course correct a bit from what the second movie established. And frankly, I'm okay with that, because this one was actually quite a step up from the second one. In fact, there were a bunch of things that I liked in this movie. The story was better in this one, the humor really worked for me. Being back at Hogwarts is always a win, and I really like the world building with them showcasing the bigger magical world, with Berlin and the Himalayas. That was really cool. Oh, and speaking of the Himalayas scene, I loved how they used the contents of the suitcases as distractions with lots of fun callbacks to the Harry Potter movies. That was great. I also like how at the center of the story we have a fantastic beast with the Qilin. I think it was used in a nice way here. This also gave Newt a way better reason to be in this story in the first place. Though I think you could still make the argument that the rest of the gang is kinda just there so that they are there. Shout out to Yusuf Kama at this point. I still don't know what he was even doing throughout the entire thing. But what do you guys think? Did you like this movie? How would you like to see this story play out going forward? Leave us your thoughts in the comments down below and subscribe so you can join us next time when we explore the canon of your favorite Cosmic. Goodbye.